My name is Jim Buizer, and I'm a professor at the University of Arizona in Tucson, Arizona. My professorship is in the School of Natural Resources and the Environment, and it's a professorship of climate adaptation and international development. I'd like to be able to say that I woke up one morning and said, I want to change the world and I really want to make a difference. Eventually I got to the point where it became important beyond just my own curiosity. Out of university I ended up, as I mentioned, at NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. And this would have been 1984. In 1986, so shortly after I got there, the scientists, using computer models, forecasted for the first time an El Nino phenomenon. El Nino, you might be aware, is a natural phenomenon, a shifting of warm water from over on the eastern tropical Pacific over to the west, and it completely changes the weather patterns. And that happens every 2 to 7 years. And they were successful in forecasting an El Nino 6 months ahead of time. Because of what my work was, which was connecting humans with the climate system, that seemed like an opportunity to go see can people actually use these forecasts. So, there were areas that we thought that we could apply to these climate change kinds of issues. So it wasn't an aha moment. It was we've learned some things that we think that we can work on climate change scales. Then I spent some time working with Al Gore, then Vice President, and this was a big thing for him. So I got more drawn into that, realizing that the real impediments weren't going to be the science. The real impediments were going to be political will. And so that's when I thought, well, and about then I had a couple kids, and so I thought I probably ought to work on this one. I mean, we used to talk, at the beginning we talked 2100, and that was too far, so we pulled it back into 2050 and then 2030, and we felt that, in fact, in many ways, we're more confident that we know what will happen by 2100, depending on the emissions scenarios that we look at, than we are in 2050. And how we live, I think, will depend on where we live, and it'll also depend on what our economic status is. If we're on the coastline and more vulnerable, let me say, if I'm a Bangladeshi, by 2050 I probably won't be alive. If I live in the Solomon Islands, I probably will have to have moved. Perhaps not by 2050, but certainly by then I'll know that I'll be having to move, or at least my kids will. I think that the changes that we will feel by 2050 have very little to do with what we do today as far as emissions. We've already created the change. It just will be there for a while. It doesn't mean it's kind of like cigarette smoking. When's the best time to stop? That was yesterday. We're addicted to fossil fuels. When's the best time to stop? That would be yesterday, given that we already started. And given what we know. And so what we'll feel in 2050 will really depend very heavily on the political will to move away from burning that black stuff. John Holdren, who was science advisor to President Obama, was known to have said, we have 3 choices. We have the choice to mitigate, reduce greenhouse gases. We have a choice to adapt, and suffer. These are 3 things that are going to happen. What we do and when we do it is going to determine what ratio of those 3. The more we mitigate, less we have to adapt, less we'll suffer. The less we mitigate, the more we're going to have to adapt and suffer. So it really is about having already caused those changes. Where if we dramatically reduce, let's say to the point where GDP could easily be down by 9%, 10%, global GDP, what's considered the low concentration pathway. we will still have continue to feel enough sea level rise that we have saltwater intrusion in a lot of parts of our coastline, the lower lying ones. I don't believe that Florida, for example, the state of Florida, which is very low, will be underwater, but they'll certainly be experiencing nuisance storms when high tide and storms come along the same way. I mean, we just filled up the tub a little higher, so it'll slosh over more quickly. Well, and we're already, I live in Arizona where the projections are for more severe and longer droughts. We're already experiencing severe and long droughts. We're in quite a long one right now. I believe that we will continue, and I say continue because we're already seeing environmental refugees. The refugee crisis out of Syria wasn't just all about climate, but it sure didn't help that there was starvation because of a drought. So it's a multiplier effect in so many of these different things. I happen to believe we have the technology for alternatives is already there. There's just too much momentum by the people who are paying off the congressman. Legally, I would say, and perhaps not so legally, but legally in the U.S. They're called lobbyists, and that there's just too much there. So I think that we do have all of the technologies. It's just the willingness to be able to implement them.